Good evening, I'm Faye Kwan. Our top stories for tonight: Russia and Ukraine to hold peace talks in Istanbul, and new Trump HR chief denies ties with Elon Musk. More coming up on AWANI International. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia and Ukraine will hold a new round of peace talks in Istanbul tomorrow, Wednesday. Russia says it supports the third round of talks, but notes that both sides remain diametrically opposed in their proposals. The Kremlin says it is awaiting formal confirmation, though state media reports the talks could run through Thursday and Friday. Previous rounds were held in Istanbul on May 16th and June 2nd. President Vladimir Putin said both sides agreed to proceed after concluding prisoner exchanges and the return of fallen soldiers' bodies as negotiated earlier. The announcement follows US President Donald Trump's warning of severe sanctions if no ceasefire is reached within 50 days. Washington has also pledged more weapons for Ukraine as Russia steps up its attacks. Scott Kapoor, who was sworn in this month as head of the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, clarifies he has no personal ties to former government advisor Elon Musk. The new chief of the agency leading efforts to slash the federal workforce also pledged to carry out President Donald Trump's agenda. Now, however, he made clear he would not be swayed by outside influence that conflicts with the president's vision. And prior to his current role, Kapoor was a partner at a Silicon Valley venture capital firm that invested in Musk's AI startup xAI, as well as SpaceX. Musk had headed the Department of Government Efficiency until his departure in late May, where he led budget cuts and workforce reductions. Tensions have lingered since, with Musk publicly criticizing Trump's policies, prompting contract threats and nomination reversals. This included Trump withdrawing the nomination of Musk ally and tech entrepreneur Jared Isaacman to lead NASA. The president also threatened to cancel billions of dollars in federal contracts with Musk's companies. We'll be back with more after the break. Stay tuned.
Check to clear. This is Gakpo. Great turn! Glass, how do you respond?
Nak gandakan potensi perniagaan anda? Boleh dengan BizOne Rewards. Pelbagai sokongan pemasaran. Seperti Sports Watch Party, Food Review,
memang sedap.
promosi di TV dan radio. Ubah potensi perniagaan anda sekarang.
Di era digital, pemasaran bukan hanya tentang penjualan semata-mata. Penceritaan menarik jadi kekuatan dalam membina hubungan perniagaan, tingkat pengetahuan, perkasakan perniagaan anda. Saksikan segmen Jiwa SME dalam program Awani Pagi dan Niaga Awani setiap Isnin hingga Khamis di saluran 501. Dibawakan oleh penaja utama jelajah Jiwa SME, Unify Business, rakan digital pilihan anda.
Welcome back. Malaysia has less than 2 weeks to strike a trade deal with the US before a 25% tariff takes effect in August. What happens if we fail to reach an agreement, and how might Malaysia manage? Weezer Hao from non-profit think tank Heya Inc. shares his insights.
With a 25% of tariff, versus Vietnam getting 20 and versus Indonesia getting 19, we are actually on very disadvantage in terms of the price competitiveness. And how are we going to navigate that? I think first thing, of course, the way Trump's one thing is he likes you to honor his power. Right. So regardless of what, I think retaliation is definitely not a plan on the table. But the key things over here is how could we actually draw US interests or US motivations to actually strike a proper deal, to strike a proper tariff trade agreements with us. So we heard a lot of news that the US would like us to remove a lot of those non-tariff barriers, including the limit cap for foreign equities to invest in our listed company, or even some of the export rules, such as the halal rules and things. Politically, this might not be feasible to remove or even to reduce in certain ways, because it might be a political suicide for the administrations. So we need to put something Trump is more interested. That seems to be a better bait to Trump's administrations, and I would say that would be one of the very important things now is rare earth. All right, so I think rare earth is a good thing for us to put on the table, because for information, Malaysia is the second refined rare earth producers. So we are actually in a situations that we can form a quad. There's a geopolitical quad organizations between Malaysia, India, Japan, and Australia. But in fact, if you look into rare earth metals, the rare earth industry metals in Malaysia, that is also a semi-quad that was funded by Japanese, operated by Australians in Malaysia. So this, if we are able to put this on the table, US, Malaysia, Australia, and Japan, this will again a rare earth metal quad for the US, and this is of very, very huge interest to the US, because they are facing a huge supply problem. The supply chain choked by China. China is trying to use these rare earth metals to choke the US, to leverage more on the negotiation tables.
Zihao also discussed how repeated tariff threats and shifting rates from the Trump administration may affect Malaysia's long-term economic resilience.
So if Malaysians were to have slapped long terms by 25% of tariff, and Vietnam's continue to get a 20%, you probably will see some of the MNC here will start to look for some new opportunities in Vietnam. They might not even shift their factories. They will just build a new supply chain over in Vietnam to support all the exports to US. And in that case, we could see a lot of business in Malaysia, whether it's SME or some of the local champions that have a huge export to US, will be affected. And if this is affected, you will start to see a certain degree of unemployment might not be that huge, right? But bear in mind that if governments do nothing, like I mentioned, to help the furniture industries or the rubber industries, then we'll see a massive layoff in that case. So, and then the rising living cost issue will even be more critical. So government is in a very difficult positions, when you try to look into these two policies together, rationalizing the subsidies and also facing the tariff from the US, because the tariff from the US will actually cause economic uncertainties, and hence causing our businesses' revenue to reduce, or even to a certain extent of unemployment rates. And that is the time that governments will need to find a way to reduce the living costs, to kind of balance up the rising living cost issues.
Iran will not abandon its nuclear enrichment program, despite the severe damage caused by recent US airstrikes on its nuclear sites. As Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi tells Fox News that Iran is open to talks with the US, but not direct negotiations for the time being.
It is now stopped because, yes, damages are serious and severe, but obviously we cannot give up our enrichment, because it is an achievement of our own scientists, and now more than that, it is a question of national pride.
He added that if the US seeks a win-win solution, Iran is ready to engage and take confidence-building steps to prove its nuclear program is peaceful. The US and Iran held talks as recently as May, but they collapsed after Israel launched surprise airstrikes across Iran on June 13th, hitting military and nuclear facilities. Trump has since said he is in no rush to return to the negotiating table. Meanwhile, a new round of talks between Iran and France, Britain and Germany, better known as the E3, is set for Friday in Istanbul. The Iranian Foreign Ministry said the talks will focus on lifting sanctions and its nuclear program, with Tehran expected to firmly present its demands. In other news, Europe will continue to ramp up its defence spending. This is the pledge from former Prime Minister of Lithuania, Andrius Kubilius, who has just been appointed as the European Commission's first defence chief.
Taking up, and we are doing really big things. I would like to start my words with some kind of self-congratulation. I am the first European Commissioner for Defense and Space to visit Washington, D.C. Because the European Union never had an European Commissioner for Defense, never. Times have changed because we in Europe are under threat. Putin is a clear and present danger. Russia is ramping up its war machine, is producing weapons around the clock. Russia produces the same amount of ammunition in 3 months as all NATO countries in 1 year, including the United States.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has said he has no intention of attacking other European countries. However, Moscow had given similar assurances about Ukraine before invading in 2022.
Global pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca plans to invest $50 billion in the US by 2030 to expand drug manufacturing and research. It is the latest move by a pharmaceutical company in response to President Donald Trump's proposed tariffs on drug imports. The investment will include a new drug facility in Virginia and expanded R&D as well as cell therapy sites in Maryland, Massachusetts, California, Indiana and Texas. The company also planned to enhance its US clinical trial supply network and support development of new medicines. AstraZeneca said the expansion supports its goal of reaching $80 billion in annual revenue by 2030, half of which are from the US. The pledge came on top of the $3.5 billion investment the company announced in November 2024. The British-Swedish company is known for co-developing one of the first widely used COVID-19 vaccines. The move to scale up its US presence is the latest by a drug maker, as Trump threatens to impose import tariffs as it seeks to boost domestic manufacturing. South Korea's new finance minister, Koo Yoon-chol, and trade minister, Yohan Koo, will meet US officials on Friday to discuss proposed tariffs. This comes as US President Donald Trump threatens a 25% tariff on South Korean exports from August 1st, citing unfair trade imbalances.
The South Korean representatives will meet US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer in Washington. Yo said he plans to focus the talks on forming a manufacturing partnership with the US. Meanwhile, South Korea's foreign and industry ministers will also visit Washington for trade discussions as early as this week. The stakes are high for South Korea, where exports accounted for over 40% of GDP in 2024. As a key exporter of semiconductors, smartphones, cars, and batteries, any disruption could ripple through global supply chains.
Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva warns that a tariff war could erupt if the US continues imposing trade barriers on Brazilian goods. Brazil has repeatedly said it will take reciprocal measures if negotiations fail to resolve the issue. He announced that Trump's tariff plans were misguided, pointing out that over the past 15 years, Brazil has run a $410 billion deficit in bilateral trade with the US. US President Donald Trump threatened on July 9th a 50% tariff on Brazilian imports starting August 1st. He attributed the tariffs on Brazil's treatment of former President Jair Bolsonaro and alleged unfair trade practices against US companies. On July 14th, Lula announced the formation of an interministerial committee to coordinate economic and trade countermeasures to protect Brazil's economy. That report wraps up AWANI International for tonight. Stay tuned for our reports on the rivalries, strategies, and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more, and be sure to follow our social media accounts at Power Affairs. I'm Faye Kwan. Thank you for watching and good night.